Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Nope,
And-
not yet. Sorry. Okay, we're live.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And given the fact that I didn't give much time between end of floor session and this meeting, feel free to munch away on food during the meeting. And before I forget, we are going to have another meeting this week. It'll either be Thursday or Friday, but don't know which day and when. So just, stay tuned, and we'll certainly be coordinating with the other subcommittees. I think all of which are going to be having a second meeting this week as well. So with that, we have 4 bills to consider this afternoon. This is the order in which we're going to discuss them: House Bill 11, then House Bill 624, then House Bill 1004, and House Bill 976. So with that, Kristen, can you update us about the status and amendments for Delegate Stewart's House Bill 11?
Yeah, sure. So we did receive new sponsor amendments. So the amendments take out all of the language regarding the Private Well Safety Fund and program. So what remains, the department must adopt regulations to identify a list of additional standards for water quality testing that the department deems necessary for each county or any specific area within a county. And the amendments add a date by which those regulations must be adopted, which is on or before December 31st, 2026. And then the bill, as introduced required MDE to establish a private well water quality database to receive water quality tests. The amendment makes that implementation of that database subject to the availability of funding. And then the provisions regarding the water testing as a condition of sale of real property are still in the bill. The only amendment there is just striking the reference to the program and fund, which are no longer a part of this bill.
Okay. So again, in terms of sort of the key changes, the fund is out, and let's see, the portal is still in the bill, but to be implemented subject to the availability of funding for the planning and implementation of the portal. Is that right?
Yep.
And that leaves a fiscal note balance of, what was it, $250,000? Is that right? Roughly.
I think it was close to 300,000. I don't.
Okay, well, whatever amount it was,
Yeah.
appropriations has signed
So
off on.
this has gone through appropriations approval. And actually, not this amendment, this is actually subjects the online portal availability to funding. And before we even had that in there, appropriations had approved the bill.
Okay. So we have the approvals necessary from appropriations to move the bill.
Correct.
Okay. All right, we've got a few questions. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was my question on the portal is subject to availability of funds. So I'm assuming that the appropriation side thinks the 350,000 plus or minus is going to be enough to implement that.
I think that's for more setting it up.
Is that?
Okay, then my second.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's right. So if the portal gets set up, does then become an unfunded mandate to the counties to provide the information to them? How do the counties get into the thing at the end of the day then, I guess?
The counties would still be required, right? If it is set up by the state, the counties would be required
to get all the information, put it together, and be able to submit it to the portal, correct?
Correct.
So because for the rural counties where we have, 70% of our people on well and septic, that would be sort of an unfunded mandate for them to come up with the money to figure out how they're going to get that data into the portal, correct?
There's no funding provided to the local governments.
Thank
That's
you.
what you're asking.
Now, Kristen, just to follow up on that, in terms of the data that has to be provided to the state portal, that's when the county has it, right? I mean, it's not required to test all of its wells under the bill, is it?
Well, it applies to certain certificates that are currently required. And then I guess, I guess, can you restate that question?
Yeah, I guess the bill, my understanding of the bill is that it does not require each county to do testing of all of its wells and submit.
So it's when they have the
that's
tests, right? When they have these tests.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, but still, it could be, to Delegate Morgan's point, it could be an issue of local costs in terms of transmitting, uploading that data. Okay, let's see, Delegate Terraza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a reason to think that that's an expensive proposition, though? I mean, like if they have the data, I'm not sure why that would be expensive to send the data. I mean, it's not like you have to buy stamps and mail it, like they're uploading data.
Yeah, there's nothing in the fiscal note about it.
Okay, and then as originally drafted, was it it required the testing and now it just requires reporting of testing they do? Is that?
No, it did not require testing as.
Oh, it didn't
drafted.
require testing.
No.
Okay.
No.
And is this the bill that did we pass this before?
I believe a version of this we did pass.
Yeah, and so it's come back with new amendments.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm looking at the reprint on page 10, and it says on implementation of the online portal under this section, a county may submit to the department records of certificates of potability. So it doesn't say that the county has to submit those. It says that it may. So I think that leaves it up to the county. And then it also says a laboratory that conducts water testing has to submit it, but it doesn't, as far as I see, require the county to conduct water testing.
No, good catch.
Yeah,
Delegate.
that's a good point.
Yeah. Good point. Anything else, Delegate Ruth, that you wanted to ask or comment?
Oh, no, thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks
Oh, no,
for
that's
pointing
all
that
right.
out.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have two questions. First, and this is, I thought I understood this bill, and then then Kristen went over it. I'm now not so sure. So they are required, though. The counties are required to come up with a plan, right? Like a clean water, a well quality standards plan, right? By 2026.
That's the department is authorized to adopt regulations.
I see. Okay,
That
so the
would-
department
that
okay.
could make a count, like, they could do it by locale if something had, a
Okay,
certain type
okay,
of-
but the counties aren't required to do that.
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then my second question is, I know that there was a now my age is showing because I forget. But there were new regulations that were adopted, I think yesterday or the day before, by EPA on drinking water standards. And my question is, does that have any effect on this bill or maybe any of the others that we're considering in terms of adopting these standards? Am I right about that?
So there were, yeah, I did see something come through. I got an email blast. I didn't look at it, but I'm not sure how that applies to well water.
Okay,
That would, so those standards I think are more for your public water systems. But
Okay.
I would have to follow, I would need to ask maybe MDE really. Somebody
okay,
with expertise to answer that.
okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see, other questions from subcommittee members? Okay, well, how do folks feel about the amendments?
Move the amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the bill as amended.
Move the bill as amended.
Second,
Okay, any further discussion or questions about this bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
I think the amendments have made a lot of improvements to it and is more conducive, but I'm still going to vote against it because of the dependence we have on well water in my county.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right, all those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Now,
Okay, let's see, that was two, right? Delegate Otto and Delegate Morgan, is that right?
Correct.
All right, bill passes as amended. 624, moving from well water systems to public water systems. 624, we had a lot of discussion of this bill last week, and we have gotten some clarifications from MDE as well as amendments from the sponsor. So Kristen, could you help us out on those?
Sure. Let me see if I can bring the reprint up. So I also sent out a reprint that MDE had made some tweaks. So Mr. Chair, is it okay if I bring up that reprint?
Sure, does that include the sponsor amendments?
Yes,
Yeah, then
that
sure.
way it's all in one place.
Yes. And also remind me, Kristen, what we sent out to the subcommittee, did you include MDE's follow-up to the questions about notice, about what MDE does to publicize certain
Yeah.
alerts?
Yes, I did include that in the materials.
Okay, so hopefully everyone had a chance to look at that. There is some notification for water advisories that I believe MDEM will publish. Well, maybe after you go over the amendments, I'll ask Gabby to summarize what she said to make sure I get it right.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Is this
Sure.
the same amendment we were looking at? No, it looks like it's a different amendment than we were looking at last week.
So so the first piece is dealing with existing notification when a system is not in compliance with safe drinking water standards. And so we were adding language that was adjusting the notice that's required for those types of notifications. And the bill came in requiring at least 3 means of notice. And that was something that the subcommittee discussed last week, that maybe that doesn't work for the smaller suppliers of water. So we've received language that would require the notice to provide at least 3 types of notice would apply just to those who serve 3,300 customers. And then so existing law, they could choose whichever, the smaller suppliers could choose which types of notification work best for them, and they wouldn't have to do 3. But that new requirement to provide 3 types of notice would now apply to suppliers that operate a system that serves at least 3,300 customers.
And that's what MDE recommended based on federal standards. Is that right?
Yeah, so the number 3,300 is to bring it to make it consistent with federal standards. The language last week was in a different part of the statute, and we moved it to a place where it was just more appropriate. So it looks a little different.
Delegate Tarassa, do you have a question?
Sorry, having trouble with my mute button. Okay, so I thought in my notes, I thought we were looking to do something for also the 3,300. Is that in there?
So that is, so if you look at, can you see the screen following line 25?
Yeah.
So there is where, and I'll just read, it says each notice given under the law by a supplier of water who owns or operates a community water system that serves at least 3,300 customers shall be issued in a timely manner by at least 3 of the means specified in paragraph 2-3. And so that's, lines 18 through 25 are the types of notice.
And then what about for those? I thought we were coming up with still a system for those under 3,300.
So that, so existing law, that they would still have to provide notice. It just wouldn't have to be 3 types of notice. So if you look at starting in line 11, that applies to everybody. So they have to state the nature and possible health effects that may result. They have to issue timely notice. But the additional requirement to provide 3 types of notice is only going to apply to those that serve 3,300 customers or more.
Okay, so just my input, I'd like to see, so that's only one type of notice, right? That they have to do?
For who?
For the under 3,300.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, just my 2 cents for discussion purposes. I'd like to see them have to do 2. But I don't know where the rest of everybody is. Thanks.
Okay. Why don't we go through the amendments and then we'll talk about whether we like the amendments or want to tweak them in any way, including what you suggested, Delegate Tarassa. So, okay, Kristen, can you continue with the amendment review?
So, and we discussed this last week. So the bill requires suppliers to give notice to the Department of the Environment and the Department of Emergency Management if there's a positive test for E. coli. And then the amendment, this was also from last week, is when there is a positive test for E. coli, the supplier of the system must immediately begin preparations for issuing a boil water advisory. And Mr. Chair, the department had raised a possible tweak to the language here, but I actually would need clarity of where that was going to go. I don't know if you would want me to ask that question now or.
Sure. You mean specifically for the.
Well, there was I read an email and they wanted to add language that it would be a confirmed positive test. And I wasn't sure if that was to go into line 3 on page 3, or if it needed to be in line 6, which I don't think it is, because I think that's where you get your preparation start from that initial test. But I just need some clarification on what the intent of adding that language would be.
Gabby, can you help us on that?
Yeah, that's correct, Kristen. It would be added to line 3,
Okay.
just to make sure, it's confirmed.
Okay.
Before.
That makes sense then. Okay, so then basically the suppliers would only be required to give notice to the department and Department of Emergency Management when there's a confirmed positive test for E. coli.
Delegate Tarassa, do you have a question?
Yeah, what is the difference between a positive E. coli test and a confirmed positive E. coli test?
I think there's an initial test, and then I think it's a 24-hour period where they wait, where they can confirm whether, if I don't know if it's through a second test, or they confirm that it is indeed, because I guess there can be false positives initially.
Okay, so, but I thought that's what one of the things they were changing here was that after the first one, they would get ready to issue an advisory, and then after they had it confirmed, they would actually send it.
So the first piece where it would be confirmed is when they're providing notice to the Department of the Environment and the Department of Emergency Management. Where on the lines 4 through 7, that applies to the preparation for issuing a boil water advisory. And that just says if there is a positive test for E. coli, they're not asking to add confirmed in that part of the bill.
So on the. So what, where is that?
So
where you
on-
say it's gonna get added is,
I'm sorry, I had like a cargo by what?
where did you say it was gonna be added? And I understand where you said it was not gonna be added, but then it'll be added to the.
Where would it be added?
Yeah.
Okay, so page 3, line 3.
Okay.
And it says if there is a positive test, it would say if there is a confirmed positive test for E. coli in the system. That's when the supplier would notify MDEM and MDE.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And yeah, the second piece is when the supplier has to begin preparations. And that's
Okay,
on
gotcha.
a positive
Thank you.
test.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was gonna add something to provide clarity on Delegate Terrasa's question, but I think she's got it answered. Okay.
Are you good, Delegate Terrasa, on that issue? Okay, great, thank you. All right, Kristen, you want to go on to the other MDE language that's being proposed?
I'll go back to the language in red after just last week, there was language that related to the MTBE notification. So
Oh, right.
currently a supplier has to provide those served by the system. And then when a system serves any facility that regularly serves minors, they would also have to get the notification to the legal guardians or parents of those minors. And Delegate Ampray did add language where, and he did intend for the parents of students at institutions of higher education would also receive those notices. He did intend parents or legal guardians to modify students, because the students would already be receiving notification by way of being served by the water system. And he did expand that language in that way.
Okay. Any questions about that? Delegate Terrasa?
Sorry, so many questions. I'm just trying to.
That's okay.
So does the fact that it says and students mean that both would be notified? Both the parents and the students? Is that what that means?
No, because the students, those who are regularly served by the water system would be notified. The second piece is ensuring, under current law, it's ensuring parents of all minors would be not notified, but this would ensure that parents of students at institutes of higher education would also be notified. The students would be notified under the first.
Oh, okay. So all
The students are already going to be notified by being served.
Okay,
by the
thank you so
system.
much. Sorry, so many questions. I got it. Thank you so much.
It was confusing.
Okay.
Okay, and so then those that come up in red are intended to make current law consistent with their current public notification rule under regulation. And also update the MTBE requirements where under current law, it just said each non-transient, non-community water system must provide the notice, and they're adding community water system. That's I think something they currently do.
Okay, so that's in line 18, adding community water system and transient, non-community water system.
So the red is the new language, the black is existing law.
Okay. So it's all, I guess by definition, all water systems that are covered for the previous notice requirement and those who are considered non-transient, non-community water systems. And can Gabby, could you, I hadn't noticed that language about non-transient, non-community water systems, but can you give us an example of what one of those is?
Let me ping my team real quick and see if they can give me an example, because I have them on call for me. So I'll
Okay.
give you an example.
Sure. I mean, maybe it's a shelter or food bank that provides water, bottled water on a regular basis, something like that. But okay, Kristen, do you want to review any other changes from the department?
That's all I got.
Can you go back down to the red?
Sorry about that. I was looking
Sorry.
at the statute because I was going to look up the definitions. To the red. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, so on line 16, so we've added that have the potential for long-term health effects. No, go ahead.
Where are you reading?
It's line 16, the language in
Okay.
red.
I think that aligns it with existing notification requirements. So right now there are notification requirements in existing law. If you look at lines 12 through 14 that apply when a violation would have a serious adverse effect. And then subsection E, that's for other violations that would have a potential for long-term health effects would then come under these provisions for notification.
Okay, Delga Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I read this language, violations that have the potential for long-term effect, they don't have to notify until 30 days after, no later than 30 days after. That seems very long.
Well, that is a good point.
Another question would be again for MDE is that existing practice? I don't know. I know the description was saying this was to align it to current regulation, but I'm not familiar with the regulations.
Yeah, I mean back on page 2, we say that notice shall be issued in a timely manner. Let's see, page 2, line 25. That new subsection 3. To me, timely manner would be shorter than 30 days.
So I think these are different types of triggers for the notifications. So this is dealing with, so I think the requirement for a timely manner is when the system fails to comply with maximum contaminant levels. I have to look at this closer, but I'm wondering if there's different notifications triggered by different events or circumstances.
Yeah, Delga Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered if this was something Gabby could answer or if she could shed any light on.
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. So currently, under under the Safe Water Drinking Act, notice for acute containment bacteria or nitrate is 24 hours. But under a notice for chronic or long-term health effects is 30 days per the team.
But then how does that for chronic, let's see, for chronic long-term effects, how would that interact with the provisions that we're putting in on page 2, requiring additional forms of, or requiring more notice for larger suppliers, and that it be issued in a timely manner for the item, for failures that are specified at the top of page 2. I mean, those don't seem to relate to health impacts, just failure to comply with certain contaminant levels. And we're saying that notice has to be timely. So maybe I'm reading this wrong, but there does seem to be some inconsistency.
No, so I will, I'm double checking with my team because they were the ones that just said that, reviewing this bill, they saw that there were some conflicts with the statute, and they're providing me some more information on the top piece. But I will say that they say a tier 2 notice anytime a water system provides water with levels of contaminant that exceed EPA or state standards and haven't been treated properly, but doesn't impose an immediate risk to human health. The water system must notify its customers as soon as possible, but within 30 days of that violation. Notice may be provided via the media or posting or through mail. So I guess what they're saying via EPA is that they have to do it as soon as possible, which is that timely piece, but within the 30 days of violation.
Okay. We have a number of hands up. Let's see. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just if I understand right, the 30 days would be for things that are not an immediate health impact, but more of a long-term impact. So it seems to me like it wouldn't conflict because the timely provision would be more for like E. coli, which is a more immediate impact. Does that seem right? The part earlier that we're worried about a conflict with, I think, is for more immediate, urgent impact.
I sort of read timely as being modified by each of the provisions on page 3. If the contamination has the potential for serious adverse impact, then it's got to be 24 hours.
Right.
If it could have a chronic but not serious, I guess, impact, then it's within 30 days. And for any other violations, it's up to 1 year. Is that still in there? Yeah. So all those would still be deemed timely, but it's dependent on the potential health impacts as to how quickly the notice has to be provided.
I think that's right.
Okay. I see other hands up. Okay. And let's see, Delegate Terraza.
So are we still talking about the amendment, or we're talking about what else might need amending?
Well, we're still talking about the amendments right now,
Okay.
but I think we got clarification on those. And I guess, Gabby, I mean, the non-transient, non-community water system, I don't, if your folks aren't able to quickly give us an example, I imagine that's okay.
Yeah, so I just heard back. So non-transient, non-community systems are like schools with wells not served by municipal water systems. Transient non-community system is like a campground, a mini mart, or a church with well not served by a municipal system.
Okay. Okay, great.
I just put it in the chat as well, just so.
Okay. School with well. All right. Great. And then let's see. So Kristen, we've gone through all the amendments, sponsor and MDE. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Delegate Terraza, well, you have your hand up, and also I'd said that we'd revisit your comment about for smaller water suppliers requiring 2 notices.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, 2 means, that's just my thought on it. I
Mhm.
understand why not go to a third, because then that starts getting into radio and television, but written notice and a robocall or written notice and text message or whatever seems like it'd be in the realm of possibility.
All right, well, can I ask the subcommittee what they think about that?
Mr. Chair,
Ye-
before we
yes.
do that, could we just adopt these amendments and then go back to that?
Um,
Well, we're taking
Sure.
out, the
Go ahead.
problem is we're taking out the 3 means of notice for the under 3,300.
But that's current law.
let me ask let me just ask at this point, I mean, who else would be interested in the 2 means of notice requiring 2 means of notice for the small water systems? Maybe just raise your hand if you're interested in that. Because if there isn't majority interest, then I think we'll just stick to our current amendments.
Then I have some comments on things that are not in here.
Okay. All right. So delegate, well,
Yeah.
I think we'll stick with it. Not considering 2 means for those small suppliers, but go ahead with your other comments.
So the other comment was that we talked a little bit last time about what happens when the notice is over. And as like a former local elected official, I can just tell you there was always chaos when there was like a boil water notice. Like, when did it end? When, like, are we still doing that? Moms would ask me moms and dads at the bus stop would say, are we still supposed to be boiling our water? And I said, I don't know. So what I thought would, I guess, be a good idea is, and the MD might not like this, but it's just a thought, is if the notice could say where you could find out, like either on their website or on the MDE's website or somewhere, you could just check to see what the status of any wording is. Like, is the water back to, how would we otherwise know?
Yeah, Gabby, could you summarize the information you emailed to
Yeah.
us? You know, you provide some
Oh, sorry.
notice and some
you're good.
cases. That's okay. That's all right. Gabby, why don't you summarize what MDE or MDEM does right now?
Right. So I think, so currently MDE's role is once the water supplier sends it over to us, like we're basically there as an advisory kind of role. So we basically tell them, you know, once they have their advisory or the when, like you said, when they're lifting the advisory, we're kind of there to make sure they have all the acceptable things in place, saying, you know, this looks good, you need to reach out to the community, and like you need to provide notification to the impacted community. We're kind of there as an advisory. We don't actually uplift or send out or do any of the notification piece, but MDEM's role, I touch base with them a little bit. They're more of the ones that will amplify messaging for the boil water advisories, post them on their social medias, and same with the lifting of advisory. So this is like similar to what they currently do with like weather warnings and so forth. So I think there was a little confusion last week about, you know, MDE amplifying boil water advisories and so forth. But no, we're more like an advisory piece telling them what it needs to be within the notice, when they need to send out a notice. But they're the ones that actually prepare and send it out to the customer. So when you say, you know, putting it on our website, that would be kind of more, I think, on MDEM to kind of amplify messaging and so forth, but it's also a responsibility of the water supplier themselves to put that information out for the impacted communities.
Okay, so that's helpful. So not MDE, but MDEM or whoever. I just think there should be a place people can check to see if something's still on. I know we actually also at least used to have that same problem with weather notices, that it wasn't really clear always out in public what the when those were lifted. There's probably some way to find them out, but it wasn't really obvious. So I just, from my perspective, it would be good for folks to know where to check to see if it's lifted, rather than having to be on, you know, Twitter, for example, or wherever it is. you know, some folks are not on social media, for example. I don't know, I don't necessarily see everybody waving their hands, yes, but I just from my experience on local government that was difficult, even as the official, to figure out exactly whether something had been lifted without going to the head of the department.
And so Delegate, what you're suggesting is that MDEM on their website indicate whether one of these advisories is current or has been lifted? Is that big?
Yeah, whoever's appropriate. If it's MDEM, that's fine. Just so that, like, let's say we're amplifying a notice, like we put in and say, yes, there's a boil water notification or what have you, or there's some contaminant in the water, and we've amplified that, then we can say, here's where you can check, you know, see when that's lifted or when the issue's been resolved. It'd just be nice if there was someplace standard to find that.
Okay. And again, since that amendment would be outside the scope of the current amendments, which we certainly can adopt, and I'll ask who wants to adopt them when we're done discussion, but we couldn't adopt the bill as amended until, you know, we draft up this idea if we want to pursue it. So I do want to ask who would like to pursue that as an amendment. Again, the idea of requiring MDEM to post all notices of advisories under this bill, as well as when they're lifted.
Can I ask something? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add that if for some reason that's going to keep this bill from passing, I don't want to do that. Like maybe that's something I could bring as a separate thing next year. I'd be curious if people think it's a good idea, but not good enough to delay the bill, for example. I can understand that point at this point in crossover season.
Okay. Good question. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think it's a good idea and, you know, certainly think it's worth pursuing, but I don't want to hold the bill up for that. And maybe it's something that MDEM can implement on their own as well without actually being in legislation. I mean, I think I'd like to move forward with this, but maybe talk to MDEM about that.
Sure. No, good idea. Maybe they would be able to do that, willing to do that on their own. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you. Yeah, I concur. Please move forward to get these things out of the way versus we're down to 48 hours. My pun.
Okay. Delegate Otto.
I'm sort of on the opposite page. I'm trying to digest these amendments, which I think they're pretty good so far. But I want to know the implications that they have. You talk about churches and what Gabby had sent us and all that. And I have many small community churches that are struggling to survive and what burden that's going to place on them. And typically they're not using their water system but one day a week at best. So I'm trying to struggle on what implications it has for them when we talk about testing quarterly and this, that, and the other.
Gabby, can you think the issue of churches came up with the context of that line 18 non-transit, non-commuter water systems, which I guess is currently in law.
It is current law.
Yeah, but so, but what type of, Gabby, I mean, in terms of a church, what type of, water system would they need to be operating? Is it a church that just is based on well water and, regularly has services? Is that covered by that language?
I believe so. And while you're reviewing it, I could double check with my team too, who's on here.
Okay. All right. And Delegate Otto, it is current. If churches are covered by that language, they're already under current law covered under that requirement. We're not adding, we're just adding for that section, community water system.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted, I had received a message from Department of Environment updating the language on line 17 is that that notice would be given as soon as possible, but no later than 30 days. So that I just wanted to point out that this is a little different than what I had up earlier.
No.
That they wanted that further clarified, that the notice under that provision is required as soon as possible, but no later than 30 days.
Okay. So again, if a violation could have a serious adverse effect, it's got to be within 24 hours.
Correct.
But any other violation or any other health impact from a violation, as soon as possible, but no later than 30 days. Okay. All right. We do have a few hands up. Delegate Otto.
I hadn't lowered my hand, but I think you
Okay.
clarified some what my questions were, and I think that language sounds much better, and I think the department would do it in a more timely fashion.
Okay. So are you good? I mean, in general, Delegate Otto, are you good with, do you have any remaining questions about the language? Are you good?
Well, with the number of amendments we've had, it concerns me that I haven't digested it and know the implications to my folks. I mean, one of my concerns, I'm the treasurer for many years of a small Methodist church that we had a outhouse. And we have a well in the church hall, and there's not but 6 or 7 of us that attend on a bi-weekly basis. And what implications are we having with this? So, but I think you clarified that. And we certainly, if we were doing something in lieu of health implications, we notify everybody in the community.
Sure. Okay. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would really like to get this bill moving. I mean, and the bottom line is this is a notice bill. This is what this is. It's about notifying people about, when their water system, so that when their water system is contaminated, so that we don't have the situation that we had. I believe it was in Baltimore County earlier. So I would really like to get this bill moving. I appreciate that Delegate Otto wants to digest the amendments, but I was just wondering if maybe we could adopt the amendments and then maybe come back at a later meeting and vote on the bill as it's reprinted. Because
All right.
I think we just keep going over the same ground over and over again. And MDE keeps making changes. At some point, we need to get this bill out. So that's the only point I'm making.
Yeah. Okay. Well, two delegates have their hands up. After that, I'll ask if anyone wants to make a motion. Delegate Terrazza.
Yeah, so thank you. I do want to get this out today. Like if we could vote on it today, that'd be great. If we're not voting on it today, I guess I still have the same question I had before, but I definitely think that's something we can come back and maybe I can talk to you about what the next step is. Do I contact the department? Can you, does the committee? But I think the importance is to get it out.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work with you to contact MDEM, Delegate Terrazza.
Okay, great.
Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to just agree with Delegate Foley and ask if it would be an appropriate time to move the amendments.
Let me just acknowledge Delegate Ruth, see what she wants to say, and then we can take your motion, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with Delegate Terrazza. I would like to not just the amendments, but try to move the bill today. We're just a few days from crossover,
Yeah.
and we've been talking about this bill for a while now. Thank you.
All right, so move the amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, the bill as amended.
Move the bill.
Second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Okay, bill passes as amended. Thanks for everyone's input on that bill. Okay, next we'll take HB 1004. Authorizing Wycomico County to set up a sanitary sewer district. Seems pretty straightforward bill. Kristen, did I get anything wrong on that?
You got it all right.
Okay. Any questions about this bill? No amendments, right?
No amendments.
Move the bill.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, bill passes. HB 976. Kristen, could you discuss the amendments, the okay we've gotten from appropriations, et cetera?
Missing something here, but oh well. So the bills requiring the department, in consultation with certain departments, to adopt regulations establishing uniform standards for mold assessment and remediation. The amendments add additional entities that the department must consult with when adopting these regulations. It'd be in addition to Department of Health, Department of Housing, Community Development, and DGS. It would also add EPA, industrial hygienists, and other professionals actively involved in mold contamination remediation. The amendments also clarify definitions, and that is it.
Okay. Again,
Oh, and so you'd asked about appropriations. Yes, this bill did come in with a fiscal note that exceeded the fiscal limit. We did submit this bill to appropriations for approval, and they did approve the fiscal effect of this bill.
Yeah, I just want to note, I mean, the bill does require MDE through regulations to establish standards relating to mold in a number of different contexts: air, surface, visible mold, and establish a risk reduction standard for mold hazards. Okay, questions? Still good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gabby, are you out there? I got an email this morning from Gabby at 1 p.m. So I'll read it to you. I hope you're doing well. On the subcommittee agenda, we have noticed the mold assessment and remediation standards is on the agenda. MDE has concerns with this bill as we do not have the subject matter expertise on mold remediation. We have heard the Appropriations Committee has approved our fiscal note for $370,211 for fiscal year 24. However, this does not address that we do not oversee mold whatsoever. We have reached out to the sponsor a couple of times, discussed the legislation. We have not heard back. We believe this legislation warrants more discussion between MDE along with other state agencies such as MDH and the sponsor as to which state agency is best to oversee mold issues. Please let me know if you'd like to talk. I called her at 25 after 1 before this, and hence I have some real concerns if MDE has some real concerns.
Okay, is Gabby, you're here. Do you want to
Yeah,
buy on your concerns?
no, and thank you, Delegate Morgan. So you basically touched on a lot what we were trying to say. So we try to touch base with the sponsor, trying to figure this bit out a little bit. And I know with the busyness of session, it doesn't always happen, but currently we don't oversee mold whatsoever. And I understand that's why, you know, the legislation was put in and so forth. But so typically how it works is we don't determine health impacts, which I think that's what this bill is to do, is to figure out, you know, the health impacts of mold and set a standard. But we are not the entity to set those health kind of impacts. We normally get that information and then we implement it that way. So we wouldn't have the expertise to even be able to determine the health impacts of mold whatsoever. And it's just kind of a complicated issue altogether. And I know EPA hasn't really touched on it for the same reasons. Not that that's a reason not to, but there's just a lot of unknown set factors regarding mold and how they impact people, and they impact people differently. So I think our concern is that it is such a health related issue. And that's just not something that MDE is currently set up for.
Okay, Delegate Terraza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you don't deal with mold assessment, then who does? I guess that's the question.
I mean, that is a good question. It's kind of, I guess what it is kind of, it touches on health. it's kind of almost like an orphan child a little bit of exactly of where mold is specifically like under.
So I guess I'm just, my thoughts is that then that's what, I mean, it's like an orphan child, like doesn't have a place to go. Is that what you're saying? So from my perspective, then the policy we're kind of voting on is that we want it put there and we want it evaluated. I mean, it seems to me that we knew what mold was when we evacuated the DLS building. And we know that, I mean, there may be like gradations like on the end of mold, but I mean, we had testimony that there was mold found in somebody's like private parts, to put it that way. Like that is like, I don't think there needs to be a lot of expertise on that front, and the rest of the expertise, I guess, I think this bill is saying this is where it should be assigned.
Right, and I understand that, but you know, setting mold standards is also about assessing health impacts, which is not within the department's expertise. And I think that's why we were saying that we would have to contract with an entity that has the expertise on how it affects people with like a public health perspective.
And Gabby, you know, the bill, you know, as you know, the department is to consult with the Department of Health, with HCD, other agencies. But you're saying even though you're sort of, it almost sounds like MDE is saying it prefer not to be in the lead on this effort. Is that right? I mean, I understand that you don't have expertise in health issues, but even collaborating with agencies that do have health expertise, MDE would prefer not to be sort of the point agency on this issue.
Correct. Yes, I think that would be one of the issues there, because we just have no way of being upset, like we said, setting health impacts of how reactionary to mold and so forth.
Okay, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do think there are some questions about this bill. My main question, not having been in this committee last year, is I recognize that it was also introduced last year as House Bill 361. Can somebody who was here then tell me what happened to it last year and how it's changed and why it didn't pass at that point? I'm also concerned about fiscal note this year, because I know like we're all struggling for you know, projects that we think are important to fund, and I just want to make sure that it's well thought out. But so that's a couple of questions. But the first one is, what happened last year?
I can't remember. Kristen, do you happen to recall?
Yes, so last year the bill it included additional pieces than just having the department establish a standard. It also authorized tenants to deposit rent and rent escrow when, you know, certain mold conditions. There was a tax credit. So the bill came in with a much broader impact. And I don't think it was ever taken up for a vote. I think there was a fiscal impact last year too, and the bill just didn't come up.
Well, I guess, Mr. Chair, my question to you is, you know, it's unfortunate, and indeed the sponsor hasn't gotten back to MDE about this, and they have serious concerns. Is that something that we would move on without, you know, speaking with the sponsor or trying to get them in the same room together? I just don't know how this subcommittee works. So that's a real question.
It's really up to the subcommittee. I mean, if we can, if we feel you know, if there are concerns of, you know, along the, if we do have somewhat similar concerns, what the department is saying, we could either try to hash them out here, or, you know, we will have another meeting this week, at which point, if, you know, we think we've resolved any questions, we could move the bill and it could get across before crossover. So, but that's really the, you know,
Sure.
really the subcommittee. So,
Sure. I mean, I understand that. I guess the way that things have been working for me and other subcommittees is that if there is this big of a chasm between what the sponsor is saying and what the department is saying, then maybe we could give them a day or two to come together and try to come to a solution that everyone can agree on.
yeah, I mean, we can certainly try to do that. Let's see what other folks think, and then we can make a decision before 3 o'clock when we all have to go and vote. So, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, to address Delegate Guyton's concern, and then I want to go back to what I was going to say originally, but this is actually, I think, the third session that this sponsor has been trying to do something about mold, and she's tried different approaches. It's a serious problem. The bill last session, I believe one of the criticisms was that it was putting the cart before the horse to try to address the issues of how to deal with mold without having regulations in place to specify, what the problem is and how to identify it. So, I mean, I really would like to see us pass something before crossover. I think it's an urgent problem that we that we need to address. So, I mean, if we need to hold it for a day or two and take it up in another meeting, I certainly think that's fine. But I really would like to do something about this year, because it's now the third year that we've been looking at this. And so I was also going to say something similar to what Delegate Terrassa said, which is I understand that MDE, it's not your expertise. I don't know if anybody's talked to MDH about whether they're willing to take lead on that, and I would be okay with that if they are. But the fact that it's an orphan is not the reason to not move forward on this. It means somebody's going to have to take responsibility for it, and maybe MDH is the better agency. But the point of this is to figure out how to identify this problem, and somebody develop the expertise on it and take lead on it, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you. Delegate Foley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally want to associate myself with Delegate Root's comments. This problem needs to be addressed. And I appreciate that MDE is not anxious to take on a big project like this, but the problem needs to be addressed. And it's an environmental problem. Yes, there are health effects associated with it, just like there are health effects associated with bad air quality. But the point is that it has to be addressed. There have to be some standards established. We can't, as Delegate Root said, can't keep running around this problem. We're looking at this hole in the ground across the street as a result of mold, it being in the building. We have people who are, who are living in rental properties, people who are living in their houses that are having to have mold remediation, and they're not getting guidance. We want to give them guidance. And I think that I would prefer to just, make sure that MDA, has what it needs in the bill to consult. They can consult with whomever they want to, but we need to develop some standards here that we can apply so that people can be assured that they have a healthy environment to live in and work in.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kristen, where do things relating to lead reside? Are those in MDE?
Those are in MDE.
Okay. To me, this is a very similar situation. So I would also support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Morgan.
Yeah, I fly with being the new guy on the block. The concern I have is MDE's comments that they aren't prepared to do this. There becomes an unknown fiscal note at the end of the day as to what it would cost to get MDE or MDH or anybody up to speed on this one. And I guess if I had my druthers, that I am sorry that Delegate Henson hasn't called them back. But maybe the two of them could get together in the next 48 hours and figure this out, because I'm really not prepared to just jump into a quagmire that even the state agencies can't figure out themselves. I do realize mold is a problem. I'm not arguing that, but when the state agencies can't figure out who's in charge of what, and then they say, well, the subcommittee go figure it out, then they come back and say, well, hell, we're gonna have to hire 25 people to figure this out. And then all of a sudden that little fiscal note just jumps considerably. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share the concerns. It is a real issue that we have to deal with, but I don't think we found the expertise to do it. And I don't think the federal government has either. There ought to be something, FEMA standards or something. I know when we had Superstorm Sandy and Chrisfield had to be rebuilt in a lot of respects, and drywall ripped out and all. Somebody knows what the levels are that needs to happen. And I don't know that we're prepared to assign responsibility and create regulations until we get to that point.
Okay, Delegate Tarassa.
Oh, thanks. I'm sorry. I'm having trouble hearing. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I know I'm saying this again, but I just think we have to do something right away. I think there are standards. I think Delegate Henson testified to them, although I'm having trouble pulling that up while we're having this conversation, but I just think it's really important to move forward. And I don't know if it has to specifically, like, I think it belongs in MDE, but if not, I don't know if we can just require it in the bill, and then it's, you know, I guess the governor's choice as to where he puts it. But I think we can't just keep punting this down further and further, because, you know, I know this doesn't cover schools, but I'm just going to tell you, we toured a school my first year on appropriations, and you could see mold like growing in the carpet. Like, there are times, and it's just absolutely obvious. We know, like, we knew with the DLS building, we know when there's, you know, we need mold remediation after a storm and somebody's house is flooded. I'm sure those standards are out there, and, you know, I'm sympathetic to MDE not, you know, feeling some discomfort in this, but I think this is an area that we just have to cover.
Okay, we'll say that the sponsor sent me some information about standards in Kentucky, I think. I think she mentioned there are some other states that have adopted standards. I'm not sure how specific they are, whether they correspond to what's proposed here.
Right.
Mr.
Chair, the bill does also reference industry standards that the department would when adopting regulations, they would have to be in accordance with specified industry standards. On page 4.
Where's that, Kristen? Page 4?
So for example, when adopting air sample analyses in accordance with the standards of, and then starting in line 6 through 12, there's associated standards for that, for the bulk or surface mold samples, lines 13 to through 20, industry standards are listed there.
Okay, yep, I see. Thank you. Delegate Guyton.
Thank you. I feel like I need to a little bit defend my suggestion, but I feel like that I was misunderstood by my colleague. I also recognize this is a problem. I'm not saying that we do nothing about it. All I was suggesting is that we possibly hold it for a day or two to allow some more work to be done on the bill, so that hopefully on Thursday we can all be comfortable voting for it. That's still my suggestion, but if this subcommittee wants to go ahead and move it, you know, that's fine as well. But I just want to make sure everyone understood. I'm not saying I'm not voting for the bill. I'm saying it's a little messy right now, and I'd like for them to work on it a bit more so that we can get it going.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks for emphasizing that, Delegate Guyton. Well, Gabby, let me ask you a question. You know, MDE specified, I guess, you know, MDE had input into the fiscal note indicating the resources that would be necessary. You know, a staff member, you know, a fair amount of money for a consultant who MDE would hire for this. Is MDE's sort of concerns notwithstanding the fiscal note, because presumably hopefully those would be funded. We passed this bill, appropriation says it's okay with the fiscal note. That is there any other sort of concern about the way the bill would be implemented that could be addressed by bill language to get at MDE's concerns? Or is that something that or, you know, if we postponed the bill, say for a day, would MDE be willing to discuss that issue with the bill sponsor and anyone from the subcommittee?
Right. And I think we would be very happy to meet with the sponsor to speak about, you know, our concerns, you know, and I know Delegate Love made a point saying, you know, that it's related to lead, but specifically we have a whole program related to lead that's been in place for years now. And this would be like a brand new issue for the department that we have no experience in. And I know that's not, and I know that's like something that could come down the road, but it's just a big uplift for the department as is. So, but yes, I think ultimately, yes, we would be willing to speak with the bill sponsor and just kind of talk about, what we could do to meet her and work and address her concern as well.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we will hold the bill with the goal of, the next time we'll meet will probably be Friday. But again, that gives us enough time to pass a bill and, for it to be moved by the House by crossover on Monday. And, I agree. I agree with what I think everyone has said, that this is an issue that we need to spend time and resources in coming up with standards, that mold is a significant issue. And, be my hope that we can, at our next subcommittee meeting, come back and, pass a bill, even if it's somewhat a bit revised from what we have in front of us now, but that we can pass a bill that gets at that issue. So with that, is there any, so I will let the sponsor know about this, and Gabby, perhaps I'll try to participate like in a three-way meeting with you and her. And I guess if anyone else is on the subcommittee would like to participate in any meeting, which will probably be sometime tomorrow is my guess, when we can all fit in, let me know. And then we'll bring the bill back on Friday. Does that sound like a plan?
Great idea.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. With that, we are done with our agenda, and certainly as soon as I have an idea as to when we'll be meeting on Friday, I will let you know. Just keep your ears out, and we'll be meeting again. And certainly when we meet again on Friday, there may very well be other bills that'll be on the agenda too. So, okay, any questions, comments? All right, well, thank you. And see you in committee in about 15 minutes.